both of you should definitely do more podcasts. I think you all have the voice for it. Like just hearing the two of you all on talk. No, yeah, honestly, I think you'll have
Nice.
a really nice voice for it.
Suhas,
I
it's the
don't know.
mic, dude.
It
You
boils
you
down
get a
to
good mic,
consistency.
you'll get a good voice. You know?
No.
Hey, Suhas and Pramod, thank you for doing this podcast, the video podcast on a Friday. And I mean, you guys were saying like just 10 minutes before the podcast, you were like, "Oh, I didn't realize you had a podcast." And apparently, I have not shared the questions with Pramod, so everything is going to be impromptu on the spot. So we'll see what kind of content comes out of it. So thank you for doing this. And I think Suhas, you and I go back 2017, 2018, and I've seen you just build out
So,
these communities. I feel like every WhatsApp message or something that's happening with like product folks is just like, oh, Suhas' name is somewhere tagged in all of this, right? Yeah, and so you're clearly there in my subconscious that keeps kicking in. And then
yeah.
I think Suhas, when I asked you, hey, do you know someone who could do this podcast with you? You recommended Pramod. And I mean, some amazing things that I've had a look in terms of what you're doing with Threado. Pramod. Is that how we pronounce it? Threado?
Yeah, that's exactly how it's pronounced.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty cool. I was going through your video as well on the website, and it feels like there's a tool that you're using that you've created to help, I guess, companies build out solid communities, right? So yeah, so how do the two of you know each other? Where did the two of you bump into each other?
Yeah, strangely, it was through one of the other initiatives. Like I don't know how many things Suhas runs, but back when the pandemic had just hit, and I was also looking to like connect with folks online, like and explore other communities. And I remember seeing Grab Chai, which Suhas had launched, and there's this like lunch club and few other like connection focused apps, right? And somehow the first meeting was with Suhas and I think Jitesh from who was at that point at Bloom.
Nice.
So that was my first introduction to Suhas, and yeah, I think then it's just been amazing to see him and the entire team like grow the product folks. And at that time Threado was not even there, like
Right.
I was doing something else. And then when I started building Threado, obviously like Suhas was like a bouncing board on many of the things. So that's like a bit of the backstory of how I got to know him.
Nice. And so as you're doing all of this as for goodwill, there's no like equity kicker that kicks in with each of these companies.
By the way, like Suhas is an angel in us.
Oh, nice.
Inside. Yeah.
That's cool.
No,
So
but
they
that was also because I think something like this needed to exist, right? I think when Pramod was building the earlier product, I remember telling him that, dude, there are too many like these already. How are you going to differentiate? That was one of my first questions, sir. Because at that point of time, and it's needed, even that kind of a product, if you talk to any community manager, they'll be like, okay, the next step is I need something white labeled. And you go search for a solution. So what happens is every community has its own nuances, and you after a point of time you feel like, hey, this is missing, right? So that amount of customization is what is the reason a lot of these white label solutions are not able to scale. So that is something that we both were brainstorming. But when he really came up with the idea of, okay, hey, I want to move into the community OS/intelligence space and the automation space, I think that makes a community manager a super that's a huge superpower for a community manager. I think that is something that I think definitely, regardless of whether you're building a community on a white label platform or on Slack, Discord, WhatsApp, any platform, I think just like how product management or products evolve, software products evolved with the analytics layer and an automation layer, I think communities also need something very similar, right? I think throughout today's discussion, you'll see a lot of community management and product management have parallels, right? So I think that is what I really was kicked about, and I was like, okay, I definitely want to be a part of this in some way. And yeah,
nice.
luckily.
Good to see angels articulating the USP very clearly. But that's great. So actually, I mean, I want to kind of go through your journeys, but since you brought this up, right? if you could explain, I mean, maybe Suhas or Pramod, how a community is being built today, let's say by companies, and then let's say Threado comes in, and then it's like, hey, now communities are being built 10x different, or the engagement is 10x as a result. What would that behavior change look like?
And maybe like touch upon a little bit. I think you just mentioned there are nuances between one community and another. So how does that really differ? And I guess what parameters are different?
I think just a quick recap on like where I started out. Like I spent like close to 9 years at Zomato, and was from the early days. Like was 13th employee there. Was there till 2019, and we had a very strong content and community playbook. Although at that point, community building was not like a buzzword, but like Zomato in most of the countries that we were present in, or Yelp, which is there in the US, we followed a similar model or principle, which is like leverage content and community to like bring people together around shared experiences and allow them to share experiences and also discover restaurants, right? So I think companies in the past like were building communities like which is around their products, and usually would like the community would engage in that product itself. Like we had positioned ourselves as a social network for the first 5 or 6 years around food and restaurant discovery. I think, and yeah, like once I moved on from Zomato and was taking a break, I had explored multiple ideas, but I think once the pandemic hit, there's very clear change. Obviously, like several other industries got impacted. What I was working on earlier got impacted, all of that, but clearly the future of work and like remote work and like everything moving online just took off, right? And all these new platforms like Discord, Telegram, WhatsApp community, that and all is like just a last 2-3 year phenomenon, right? If you go 10 years back, it was just like PHP forums and like there are a few forums that existed, but now there are so many avenues where people can come together. And that's on the user side. Like I think that shift has happened, and that's the norm here. You will see any platform today, whether it's Substack or any new platform, is introducing a community feature of some form. And if that's the user trend, then brands, on the other hand, are shifting away from traditional forms of marketing, right? Which is like get dollars, throw it on like platforms, because that's also getting competitive, and the real estate is being fought by like several brands, and there's ad fatigue as well on the user side. So brands want to build deeper relationships with customers too, right? And principle followed there, which we were doing at Zomato, is go where the users are, right? And today I think the users connect at various touch points, whether it's on the product or outside of it, and make sense for the brand to actually enable those experiences, so that customers come together. I think broadly that's the shift I've seen over the last 10 years or so in terms of how organizations think about engaging with their customers and build customer communities. So today they want to go where the users are, enable those experiences, provide support where they are. And that's the journey we took as well. So initially we started with a white label platform. We spoke to about like 100 community builders, including Suhas at that point. There were 2 friction points. One is existing communities were largely on Slack or Discord, and shifting to a white label platform is like not going to be so easy, right? Because there's habit formation there. And I think that was fundamental to understanding that, hey, like we probably have to flip the approach. There are problems, like people who want to create these community experiences face problems, and how do they add value to as many members as possible. And on the member side as well, how do you get value from the community is the problem to solve. So we felt let's address that rather than saying that, hey, the community has to exist on this one platform, right? And which led to the current version of Threado, basically, right? So today, I'd say we basically help community teams in companies make sense of what's happening across multiple touch points, right? And who's engaged, who's not, who do they need to nudge. And a lot of times as the community scales, this becomes very difficult to get a singular view and also to take action on it. So once you get the data, what do you do with that is another challenge, right? So we largely help companies automate a lot of these while still keeping those interactions personalized, right? And so we're more of a community insights and automations like platform, and that's what we save a lot of time and help activate more members in the community, right? So that's essentially what we do. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, would love your perspective as
Yeah,
well.
no, I think
Yeah.
no, absolutely. I think you covered most of it. I'll probably just add on why I think that's a little more like Ajay, you mentioned, right? Maybe I'll cover the nuances bit and why I think it's important in 2023, especially post pandemic in a digital first world that we're in today. It's become very easy to start communities compared to Anirudh back then. Remember, even with a lot of communities were offline first, right? Way back in 16, 17, 18. I'm
Yeah.
sure with Zomato as well, I think there would have been an initial offline activation angle
Yes.
to it. In the pandemic, we were forced to start digital first, and 2023 onwards, it will be hybrid approach, right? No one's going to do either or. Definitely, you'll have some form, but a lot of communities starting online.
Yeah.
So what has changed here is become very easy to start community, but at the click of a button, you can be, there's a sea, there's a wave of these communities that you can get lost in, right? Offline is at least, slightly more curated, slightly, okay, hey, I've invested some time.
Yeah.
It's a little more tightly knit. So that's the difference I see now. Retention and engagement problems are what we're seeing in communities. It's no more the acquisition. Way back in day where we saw acquisition was a challenge, that's moving into a retention and engagement challenge. So here, one, there was no way to measure this. That's why I think, okay, first step you do is, okay, you measure where we're at. Slack and other platform give you basic analytics. You go deeper with, okay, hey, how do I do it? Second, major problem as community managers is, hey, beyond a certain point, how do I even manage this? Like, it feels like a 24/7 job, right? Like, just a little bit of automation makes me feel like, okay, there is an additional person helping me. All right. And if I get more automation, it's like, okay, now I have a team with me. Right. So that empowerment, which maybe Zapier did for indie builders, is something I feel like, this analytics plus insights plus automation is helping community manager.
Nice.
That is the change that I see. And on the nuances bit, I feel again, having spoken to a bunch of white label platforms, Circle has killed it, right? They picked one niche, double down, but the second layer of startups that came in haven't been able to catch up, mostly because every single, like, maybe if someone will kill it with a managed play, right? Okay, hey, I'm going to build out a certain set of feature. I'll help you integrate this within your app and then build some amount of customization for you. So pure product play is very, very difficult. Nuances because every single use case now, an edtech startup wanting to do a forum based approach to a gaming startup wanting to do interactive community within their app is going to have slightly different features that they would need for their target segment. You can build a white label solution, but you will have to do some amount of customization if you want to scale. So a lot of startups are getting stuck. That is what I meant by the nuances for community.
I think you touched upon how you said acquisition is getting a lot easier. Like my initial instinct, not being in the space, my thought would have been just with all the noise that there is, because it's so easy to start a community. I actually thought acquisition may be harder because everyone there may be a perception that, oh, I'm already part of X number of communities. I don't want. There's just so much noise.
We will see that happen. We will see that happen, and like what Pramod said around fatigue, right? Like you're getting that digital ad fatigue. That will happen here. But today, why I said that is a community will always have a content layer, some form of acquisition. Someone does it via a newsletter, someone does it via maybe a podcast like this, someone does it via events like the way we did. So different acquisition channels. In a digital first world, we've seen a lot of people, especially in the pandemic, having formed either their individual brand somewhere, some social profile they've created, or some pages, Twitter meme pages, Insta pages. So you've seen a lot of content come through. Now, once you have a good top of funnel content, if you can curate this audience into a community, fine line between an audience and community. If you can do that funnel, that is what I meant by, okay, it's become slightly easier to at least build that acquisition here.
Understood.
Just adding on to that, I think so. 0 to 1 is always difficult, and I think and every stage is going to have its hardships, but 0 to 1 always takes time, and especially when you're building community, you need to have the patience, consistency, and if it's adding value, and you're doing not just for the sake of creating like a Slack space, right? So it's important, but I think to the point on it is sort of becoming a now, because just taking the category that we are in, like MarTech tools, there are like 8,000 odd MarTech tools out there, right? So today, I think just from a business standpoint, selling a tool is not the only way to drive your business growth. You ideally want your tool to get adopted, right? And like, for example, when was the last time you saw an ad for Notion or like Figma, right? So you basically got someone who's passionate about it recommending to use it, and that's how you discover it. I think like almost every company would want that kind of like word of mouth organic loop, and which is where like community led growth is becoming sort of as important, along with product led growth, which has been there for like last 5-6 years basically.
And
Well
Ani,
said.
since you do you do a lot of case studies. Remember back in the day, Notion and Figma, the two examples you mentioned, have very, very nice playbooks that they've been able to create in a new age community. Like how we had Tableau and the Salesforce communities back in the day. These two companies have nailed it with very minimal brand spend, in terms of they don't really give too much cash or money in the hands of the community
on the
members.
traditional stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like I've not seen a single performance ad on any of these folks, right?
Exactly.
And it's funny you say this. So we run a performance agency, and we get crushed sometimes because companies similar fatigue, ROAS, hey, this is not working, man. And like we've always tried to. I mean, what's happening with the startups today is it's like, because I've received money, for me it's imperative to grow quickly. So their first thought is, let's do traditional and let's do performance, right? How do you convince them to say, hey, do community led? Because that, I guess, has massive long-term benefits and exponentiality. What's the conversation there?
Yeah. So I don't think we tell them do one over the other, right? Like, that's not, so performance marketing has its own, pros and cons of it. And it's also the way I think every company should do it, because but do it in a limited sense. You don't put all eggs in that basket, right? Like, but you do it for achieving certain objective. So the persona that we sell to, or like use Threado, they're mostly community managers who already have a Slack community or a Discord community or discourse, and they start using it. They report it to their marketing, mostly the marketing departments, right? And when you think of the new age marketing department, like earlier it would just be performance marketing and maybe like content play. Now it's content, community, and like performance marketing being there.
And
right?
the new AI marketer that's going to kick
in. The prompt engineer, maybe there's a prompt engineer like for But
I saw this entire stack of tools. Like someone had mentioned that a digital marketer today uses 8 different tools, and each of these now has, like, someone has launched like an AI tool which can do it.
We'll talk about this. We did a complete analysis on all the AI tools. I feel like your marketing team today can be essentially one person if you want. I think the future will be that. Right? You replace all your analyst associates essentially with tools, and you get maximum leverage. It's crazy. Like, sorry, I'm digressing, but there's this tool.
No, not at all.
On the content side of things, like if we had to get a content writer, let's say they're charging 2.5 rupees a word. If I had to get let's say 40 articles out, let's say this person will charge me 75K, right? That tool is charging me 2,500 rupees. Like, just the 25-30x leverage, you can't fight it. It's an eventuality that I mean, these folks, analysts, will have to become CMOs quickly in smaller companies. But
how good is that content compared? Sorry, please go ahead.
How good is the content? It's about iterations a lot. I think a lot of people are playing with the free version, so you're like, oh, okay, maybe it's not that great. I think with the paid version, you can squeeze the juice, but you obviously need someone to play the last mile for each of those tools. But these tools are great, man, for everything. I mean, YouTube descriptions to copywriting to content ideas to, hey, now I'm just waiting like this text to change to audio, right? Then it's Jarvis in our pocket.
There are enough tools. There's so many tools doing that already. So I mean, you could stitch together multiple tools and essentially like produce a movie, like without anything else.
True.
But go ahead, Pramod.
I mean, like I don't think the the team would go away anytime soon, because when you explore these tools, like they do give answers, but I think it's usually like what 90% of the answers look like for that question. So I think like there's still, like you said, the last mile delivery, right? So I think there's going to be a hybrid where you use these tools, like it could maybe help you with the headline or like the structure of it, and then but then you have to like bring in your own flavor. Yeah.
But Pramod, does it reduce a 4-man marketing team to a 1-man? Do you think that is going to happen by the end of 2023? Say,
I don't think like by end of 2023. No.
I think 2023 is too early.
Each of the
too hard to prove.
Things are like, if you look at performance marketing or like content, maybe content writers, like you earlier might need to hire 5, but maybe you reduce that to like 3. But I don't see it coming down to just one person being able to do this, because there are multiple aspects to like I think just running a marketing engine. So
I think it reduces your workforce per marketing vertical. Like I think like Pramod said, like you reduce the number of content marketers, but you don't get one marketer to do the whole gamut of marketing activities.
You probably increase the productivity of each person on the team in different ways, and rather than throwing people at the problem. I think.
No, but this is baseline, no? Like imagine 10 years, exponentiality kicks in for each.
So I think like 10 years time, this might be completely different.
I think 10 years is too far to be. I'll take the other end of the spectrum. To be very honest, I think whatever we've seen, yes, AI has been there for a long time, but whatever we've seen in the last 6 months in the consumer side, the way things are blowing up today. And why I asked you that is I feel, and I'll take it on the pod, like I'll go on record and say this, 15 to 18 months from now, you'll see a tool where you just put a text, you'll get a ad quality creative, you'll get ad quality, the caption, it will give you, and eventually maybe another 15, 18 months from there, it will tell you, okay, dude, this is the demographic you can target, take this, put it in. And Facebook might build an integration, or whichever your platform will have an integration built in, wherein this will directly go, you just put your budget also, you type on text, and it's automated. Like it's a one-click input. So count it as an 18 plus 18, but it's not, in my opinion, it's not 10 years away for sure. I might be wrong, but I'm going to take that side of the.
No, I'm with you.
I think I agree too.
Yeah, and I feel like we need to move more to the humanistic side of things. I feel like in 10 years also, like, I mean, our avatars will be doing the podcast. You just be like, bro, I can't make it. I forgot. You guys show up at the podcast.
Yeah, so true.
Maybe it's not us speaking, like,
it's a program.
We read all the answers and then,
Exactly.
Probably make better
honestly, 12 months back, if we were speaking about this, maybe I would have agreed with you that, okay, hey, it's still going to take time. Maybe, whatever we are seeing our version 1. But in the last 6 months, you're just seeing so much happening here. It's like, and maybe 2 years later, I might be completely, just how we saw the Web3 wave, we've seen this AI wave earlier, we've seen the data ML wave come through. Maybe 24 months from now, it'll look like, okay, there was a lot of surface level. But at least in the last 3 months, 6 months, the amount of activity you're seeing happen. And every progressive, right? 6 months ago, then OpenAI, then a bunch of a slew of these small apps that have been built as wrappers. Those are powerful. Each of those can give you, and today itself, like what I mentioned about, hey, enter a text and gives you an yes, it might not be that polished yet, and that polish is what it will take 15, 18 months. But that part will be definitely solved for. Like you mentioned, 18 plus 18, 36 months from now, maybe, everyone's producing that and then no one, gets caught on. So then communities is maybe going to be the thing, or maybe something, don't know what that is going to be. But the humanization is going to come back.
Yeah, I think the difference in the case of AI versus a lot of the other examples you mentioned, Web3, etc. I think there the tech, it was being tech-led, right? And then we're saying, okay, this amazing tech is there, then we need to find an application for it. Whereas here, I think we already know what the applications are. We're just like, oh, when this tech comes, we're just going to deploy and implement, which is, I think, what makes it exciting.
True. Somewhere these two might go ahead and merge. You'll see one next wave that 100%. Comes through. You'll see a wave. For example, a lot of the consumer applications of Web3 were driven by this NFT hype, because NFTs is something that comes through. Crypto and NFT are two use cases. Blockchain is still on the infra side, right? It was driven by NFT, and you saw this huge pump, and of course, it didn't last. But with AI, generative art has become so easy. Today on Midjourney, on that Discord, if you sit on text, you get such crazy level images. I don't even need to use Canva.
I feel like a fraud sometimes. But it's amazing.
No, but to your
It's
point in
scary
terms of
sometimes.
NFT and crypto coming
Yeah.
together, I felt like the amplitude or the amplification of the communities also really picked up. I remember we did a NFT project last year. Man, Discord is in its own universe. Like
I agree.
I hadn't essentially used Discord till then, and I'm like, man, there are so many Discord communities, and everyone,
True.
doing barters, and then there are people scamming us on Discord. Like it's just
Yeah,
the
It's a
human being
that's
is
different world. Yeah, it's
yeah.
completely different world there.
Yeah.
exactly why I told you it's a little scary. I think that will happen again with this AI. It's very easy to morph honey and then honey message me, hey, can you just send 5,000 rupees?
Yeah.
I'm like,
I'm
yeah,
worried
good,
about
take it. Like,
some harassment cases against me where people, if you have vendettas, man.
yeah,
Right?
dude, that's scary. That is scary.
Uh,
That is scary.
but tell me this, in your in both your experience. I mean, like, I know with the product folks, I get a lot of emails. I see there's a WhatsApp group, right? I'm not part of the Slack. I'm assuming
Yeah.
there's a Slack community as well, right?
Slack is the larger community.
Slack is the larger
Yeah.
community, right? And then we're doing some work with some clients where their community is on. I don't know whether you want to call it a community, but let's say there's following and then there's community on these social platforms on LinkedIn and Facebook and things. So that what are you seeing today in terms of medium, right? Like are you seeing, hey, B2B SaaS focused companies building communities in a certain place? Are you seeing B2C versus D2C? Where is it being created?
Like we currently work with 680 organizations who have integrated on our platform, and while there is a bias because of the integrations that we have done, but of the 680, like 80% of them are on Slack or Discord. So we have like 5 other integrations, but like Discord, some forums and all that. Slack and Discord are way I think ahead. If you look at even the stats, I think on a weekly basis, Discord has about 19 million active servers. Although a majority of them, they say 90% of them is less than 15 members. But even if you take 10% of that, like it's still a million active servers plus, right, in a week. Same thing with Slack. They're in hundreds of thousands of Slack workspaces, which are being used for communities, right? And then obviously we've not gone into like WhatsApps, like, India, like Suhas was saying earlier, I think WhatsApp is the de facto way to engage, no matter which organization, whether it's be like, any D2C brand or like VCs, doesn't matter. Like it's always on WhatsApp predominantly. And Telegram is another massive, like, with crypto and like, even during COVID, I think there were a lot of like these Telegram groups that had come to support various initiatives. Because of WhatsApp's limitation of the members, like, Telegram was massive.
Right.
So I think it's not like one medium in a sector kind of thing, but yeah, like B2B SaaS space, I would say it's a mix of like largely on Slack because you use Slack for work. So that's where people are. And some of the as you grow large, then you tend to have like a combination of Slack plus a forum, which is custom for with you. We do work with edtech or like professional networks, like let's say for learning communities like product folks. There also it's Slack predominantly for if it is more on the business function side of things. But when you go to developers, it's Discord predominantly, right? Like we work with Scalar uses us there. They have one of the largest Discords, I think, in India. And I think developers in general, like it's GitHub, Discord, typically where they hang out and the community interacts there.
And this doesn't matter if it's in India or outside of India.
It is common for dev tools or even open source projects. It's usually most of them are either going to be like a combination of GitHub plus Discord. Some of them even have Slack groups. So usually these are the usual suspects.
Pramod, one question there. Do you see demographic in terms of age being the larger factor there? That's just my observation. I've seen dev communities being built on Slack as well, but I generally see the senior
I think demographic does play in. I've seen the Slack ones probably are like, which have been there for like 6-8 years. They have like Slack communities, but more recent ones, they're on Discord. Like, if you look at Vercel, for example, they have a massive Next.js community called, no, it's on Discord actually. Yeah.
Oh, that's on Discord. So I think
Yeah.
the younger folks generally I've seen them hang out on
Yes.
Discord. And this
Discord.
also happened in the pandemic. A lot of colleges set up
Yeah,
in
true.
Discord. So that way it became a little
What
easier.
is
And
younger?
gaming communities.
Would you say
College.
like
Yeah,
20
gaming community.
college? Okay, huh.
22 and below, I would put Discord.
Correct.
22
Yeah.
plus, I put in Slack.
And then you're seeing that's on the B2B, and on the D2C side, you're seeing WhatsApp, Telegram.
That depends on the
size.
location as well. I think on the D2C side, in the US, we've seen D2C brands also using Slack. So like, you won't see a lot of Slack like D2C brands over here, but like Ultra Human uses us. They have one of the most engaged Slack communities that we've seen. They have a 3,000 member. I think right now it's like close to 4,000 members on Slack for their customers. Right. But yeah, mostly it's like WhatsApp, I think, and obviously audiences are on Instagram and all of that. But yeah, community, I think, WhatsApp, Telegram. Yeah.
Health and fitness, I think, in general, is a sector where I feel community will do really well. And one good example of that is Fitter. Even
right?
Imagine we never
What's his
spoke
name?
about
Jitin, I think. No. What's the founder's name? Jitesh.
Yeah, Jitin or Jitesh.
Yeah.
So
they've done a good job even on Facebook.
Exactly.
Facebook is
another.
Gonna
say that.
Facebook groups. So again, there, I was just we were hosting, like, there's another organization called Community Hack. That I'm a part of. So we were hosting the community director of Airbnb. So the same question, like, how did you decide on the medium was asked, and I think because this community existed from like before, like, and I think the hosts are like on Facebook. So Facebook group is the norm. So they've not, once it grows beyond a certain scale, that's what there becomes that inertia, you could say, to like, why switch? Most of them are going there, right? So
but problem with
content also, like Pepper content also has it on Facebook groups. So I think it's like, sometimes it depends on the kind of persona you're targeting. Where do they hang out more?
100% that, like, no, exactly 100% just that, right? It is about, like you mentioned in the beginning, like you mentioned now, it is about where people are hanging, right? For us, the decision was clear. We were targeting startup product. So basically not college students. That's why Slack became de facto for us and not Discord. A lot of people ask us this. Facebook worked really well for mom and pop, worked really well for a larger a segment that's slightly older and slightly not so new age also, right? They're sitting there. But Facebook came out with a recent stat. I don't know whether it's official or not. Only 16% of your community actually gets a notification of your post. That was I'll send you a screenshot of this. So when discoverability, Facebook group specifically. Same problem happened with LinkedIn. So this is a real estate problem, right? When you have so many notifications going on, what do you show your member, your user? LinkedIn also, to be honest, professional communities in our heads would have easily existed on LinkedIn. All of us use LinkedIn. And it's so easy to set up a community on LinkedIn. For my demographic, so easy to see, check everything, right? Curated community, LinkedIn is the best. But there's no way to engage your community. It's probably one of the worst platforms to get engagement on community. Great platform for creating content, etc. But there's a missed opportunity.
What is it? Because the structure of LinkedIn is not set up for engagement. Because
you don't even get to.
Why?
You don't get a real estate. Basically, you're a product manager for communities, right? All of us agree with this. I'm sure 100 people within LinkedIn know how important it is. But they have other things that is stacked ranked on top of them. Content feed takes #1 priority for them. Connections becomes #2. So it is impossible. There's a maximum number of notifications that I can send a user before I piss him off. So if communities also become, you'll see one or two communities has not been able to crack, or maybe there's some metric internally that they have not been able to move, but it's a huge missed opportunity. Honestly, none of the other tools.
Largely to do with the their main focus is the content feed, like, variable content there and connections. So even if you see, like, Twitter had it still has communities, but I don't think it's come into the forefront as such, right? Like, it's still very, like, there's no private space concept yet, because it's just free flowing, and people come in for the daily like, dose of like new content that's out there. So yeah, which is where I don't think it's priority for them also to, sort of carve these out. But at least that's what it looks like right now.
It's funny. I feel like, and tell me if it's already happening in the ecosystem today. Let's say I have an idea, right? And I want to build a B2B SaaS product. The first thing I want to do is, let's say I want to figure out 10 companies that I can run a pilot or do some form of like collaboration with, right? Let's say I've done that customer development with them. I get some patterns. I want to start building. At that point, it might be interesting to create a community with those 10 companies or those 10 community managers, which slowly expands, right? Are you seeing that form of, I don't know if it's called product-led and now community-led growth in this context, but are you seeing that happen at that stage?
100%. This has now become a playbook. In fact, they are now termed as design partners, quote unquote.
Nice.
These first 10 people that come in, which was earlier maybe a beta community, is now a design partner. So even when you talk, and you're probably going to raise some money in B2B, maybe Pramod can attest, but they'll tell you, okay, how many design partners have you spoken? So that become a terminology. And essentially, these people are your early beta, what we used to call early beta community. This is essentially. So whatever you mentioned is today de facto SaaS playbook that I'm seeing.
So I have a slightly different take on the playbook, and which we applied. I mean, obviously, we had like early design partners, you could say, but like, for us, they were like customers, like, who are using our product. So the thought of, hey, let's find 10 design partners, let's build a product with them, and then, that is the point where you start the community. I would say the community actually you can start like much before than that stage, right? So persona is facing certain problems, like, they need solutions for. That doesn't necessarily have to be a tool, right? You can solve those problems through content as well. So if you like, there's inspirational content of how others have done it. Let's say there's content on frameworks of how you can solve these problems and all of that. So our thought process was, let's build that out while the product building might take, months or whatever, right? During the time, like, you build this audience, you start giving out signals where basically we're putting out our thoughts on how we are thinking of this space, what needs to be solved, how it should be solved. Here's what others are saying. Then you start interacting with your persona more, right? So otherwise, what traditional even now, like, I think there is general approaches: go to your network, get like, customers from there. So we sort of, and for us, US was the market. Like, that's 80% of our customers are US today. So how do we get to the US, right? Like, without having that network effect there. So it's by building this, like, sorry to say, but I don't like this term, but like thought leadership is where it starts off. Like, you don't have a product, but then you start creating these frameworks, you start creating these ebooks, or like, the community-led growth stories and all of that. We built our audience that way. We did a few launches on Product Hunt, which was more like resources and like micro tools. Built our waitlist to about 6,000. And while we were building this waitlist, we got our beta customers, because they would come in, they'll be like, hey, this looks interesting, we'd love to try. And it was all organic, that came in. So I think, to what Suhas had indicated earlier, like, build the audience. From that, like, you'll start interacting with your persona, and you'll get your beta customers. And actually around that time, start the community as well. With, let's say, the beta customers, like, could be 30, 40 or whatever, right? So we started our, so we had about 30 beta customers. Then in May is when we started our community.
Where did you build your community?
Slack. We have a community on Slack now.
Okay.
Yeah. So we dog food our own product there. And it was for her, so the 60 odd users from these 30 communities, they were the first ones to be there. And then now it's grown to like 300 plus right now. And, we keep funneling people from like our product to the Slack, right? So yeah, I think, like, build audience, get to your persona, build that organic loop into the product and the community. I think that's the playbook. Not just like what we've discovered. I see a lot of other companies do that today. Like, Topline is one of them we've taken inspiration from as well. I think they do phenomenal content. Zera.io is another one in the product management space, right? So I think we'll see companies think of themselves not just as a product company, but like a media, like a content arm and a community arm and a product arm, right? So that's the playbook that will work.
To be honest, Pramod, I think this is stack ranking. Like what you mentioned is exactly what I would see, exactly like what you said, like the way you all did side project based, waitlist, that you're seeing a lot more people. So what you mentioned, I think, is an extension. I think the core thesis of a beta/design community will still be there. Whether someone just does just that, or stack ranks, like you mentioned, without the content play, without the audience play, without the putting yourself out there play, is very difficult to attract that. So they will have to do it in some form or the other. How they do it is based on bandwidth. But I feel it's just stack ranking. You will have to do that to get to this stage, unless you have like some other way of getting to beta partner. So I think what you expanded on this. Yes.
What is stack ranking in this context?
In this context, is to build that beta community or that design partner, you will have to at some point figure out a way to get to these people, right? Now, whether you do that one-to-one and figure out just that design, or you build this layer on top and then speak to a lot of user interviews, speak to a lot of people, you will have to attract them. Now, how you attract is what I meant by stack ranking, that you will definitely need to have a content play, community play, a product play. That way, exactly like what Pramod mentioned towards the end.
One other thing, I think in terms of stack ranking, what I've seen, and maybe if let's say you do the community later, right, and or like the content later, I think there's slight disadvantage, but I mean there are a lot of companies who have succeeded as well. But the process would then be that you get these design partners, let's say for 10 months, or you build the product with them, and then you go out, right? Because now you have launched, or let's say you have general availability of the product. Then you have in the pressure of like driving growth from there on. So in the absence of these flywheels, like content and community, essentially you when you start doing it at a later stage, you will start off with, hey, I had customers from my network, but then you will hit a wall, or it will be difficult to get, let's say, folks from other geographies where you don't have the network, right? And then the easiest answer is to say, let's hire a sales team and deploy that, right? So I think the flip side is, if you build this engine, then yeah, you still need the sales team, but you at least have a way for getting customers in without just being a sales first kind of an approach, I feel. So, but yeah, I mean, both approaches are there. I've seen companies do well both ways, but I feel this helps, at least in our case, it helps us sort of build the brand also, and not just be a product that we're cold mailing everyone. But yeah, helps us shape the industry and take a stance through what we're doing. Yeah.
I think it boils down to one word, right? Trust. Now, till we find a cooler term for thought leadership, till then, I think what is thought leadership? We're trying to build trust in that industry that you're doing. Community helps you accelerate that, right? Sales is not. So sales, if you add the sales layer, now again, stack rank that, right? If you can add a sales layer on top of this, you build trust. Audience, a lot of people get to know you. Community, deeper relationship, start trusting you more. Then product comes, then you're like, then users are like, members are like, okay, they're not just talking, they have something to show as well. And then when you try to sell, some of it becomes a lot easier. I think that is what that entire stack comes together.
Yeah, like earlier it used to be very like, hey, send me the lead, and then the nurturing of the sales happens. Like I think with your thought leadership, which is content, and then your community kicking in, your sales, I think like 70% of your sales already done, right? So I mean, maybe even more. So I think that's really cool. Tell me today, if you had to think about your marketing team, I'm seeing a lot of companies not hire a community manager early on, right? Like I feel like your first, especially if you're a startup, like your marketing team is, get a design person or get a content person, maybe SEO, some performance, right? And then there's a marketing manager kind of sticking at the middle layer, right? Where is how would you structure today's team, given first of all, you're so knee deep in this whole community piece, but also with your so much of AI exposure that's happening across the board?
Yeah. So yeah, in the past as well, like the community hire was my first hire, like wherever, like, so and like Zomato, I was helping set up Zomato in different locations. So if we go to like Melbourne, my first hire would be the community person, and then a content person, right? And the sales comes after that, because I think like it's important to understand and have people on the team who understand the persona very well, who you're serving, right? And when you think of community manager, I'm not talking about just the operations handling part. I think Suhas and I discussed this in a separate discussion. Like it's a domain expert, right? You get someone who understands the domain well and has like is doing it by passion and interacts with the community on a regular basis, because that accelerates your like learning as a company, also like significantly, right? And I think that's an edge that a lot of people might not think of when starting out, because they're like, hey, let's build product first and then do that later, or not do that because like sales team can get the leads in. But I think just having that one person on the team who is an evangelist or domain expert who actually knows the persona is how I would think of building marketing teams of today as well. So community content, both are like very, very important. And I think it's compounding. The reason why I think people like might not think of this is because if they're expecting immediate returns from it, then it's not the right way to approach it, right? But if you're building a long-lasting brand, and a product that needs to, like I said, there are 8,000 martech tools out there, and you don't want to just sell, but like you want it to be adopted, you need to invest in that, like flywheel early on.
Are there types of brands or industries that lend themselves better to community building? I mean, I know that's a broad question, but in general, are there ones that you would say, oh, this one, maybe it's not the priority? Or is it just, there is a community for every single brand and every single person?
I was just saying it has accelerated. I wanted to just take a take on that. Like Annie mentioned, maybe today brands are not looking at community. I think it's the other way around. Brands are not finding good community managers. They want it. I'm seeing so many requests, but there aren't community managers. It's like, where would you bucket community under? Right?
Yeah.
In marketing, how we have SEO on one side and performance marketing on one side. I'd say community management falls under the SEO bucket. First 12 months you don't see a result, but it's still important. That
Like
way.
a quantifier.
You still need it. Yeah.
Right.
But 12 months later, okay, suddenly from Google, you're starting to get organically. So, okay, wow, why didn't I start it earlier? Right. And that's where the win comes in. Same thing for community. First 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, you'll not see the result of it. And like Pramod, actual strong communities get built slowly, one by one. You have those human interactions coming. How many people in our network? We can find a performance marketer because that is algo driven. Someone who's done that.
Yeah.
The community, handful of them. And
tell all these,
like,
I was going to say, tell all these upgrad folks to start a community. Like you have DCMA or whatever, DMCA, like their certification, do a community manager certification.
It's still not hot enough. The day I think this entire thing shifts from performance, because ROI driven, you will not see. Like, see, performance marketing is a tap, right? And you can also chime in here. A month you spend on this, you can start measuring. Of course, it takes time to optimize, etc., etc. But a month into it, I can see, okay, I've spent 15,000, 20,000 bucks on Facebook ad, and I know how much return. And if I can optimize a ROAS greater than one, at least I'm starting to make money from month one. Of course, I can optimize that, no doubt about it. But community is not like that. I need to spend minimum 3 months regardless. And you need to get someone one step ahead who is maybe like community management has also now started breaking into verticals, right? You'll have a community strategist, then you'll have community managers, and now you have community operations. So it's actually 3 layers. We term all of this under community management. Again, because the field is not there yet, but you'll see a lot of these roles in the West have started disintegrating already, right? A community team essentially will have a strategist, and that can be a consultant, right? Sometimes you might not find someone full-time coming here. Then you'll have a community manager, and then you'll have the ops. So it's essentially helping one, you're stacking that up as well. So it's a matter of time, I feel. I think we're just not there yet.
Yeah. But actually, to your point, I think the awareness, you have to work on both sides, right? The awareness has to be created that I need someone, and then, hey, we're funneling that with, here are community managers that you can hire. And I see that on the offline micro ecosystem, microcosms, if you want to call it. Like we work for every building, there's a community manager, right? Like it's self-sustaining, do your thing. But I think with digital, you're not even building the funnel for a community sometimes. You're building the funnel for content to social to come to my website and then sign up for demo, right? Like is there a community layer itself which is required?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Ajay, on your point on what layer, what function or what domain has not been touched, I think anything that has moved, like if you consider banking, maybe we didn't have a community manager, traditional community manager there, but neobanks, all of them
100%.
started. If
Such
you
a good
remember
Jupiter,
Great example.
they started. Pepper Content, in the earlier days, you would have agencies who would do it for you. They have now a tech-enabled platform. They're essentially a tech-enabled platform for you to get the trading. Now, of course, they have the copy.ai version of it, but they started with then they're doing a fantastic role on community management. And like I mentioned earlier, education, fitness, all the space. In fact, VCs are hiring community managers today.
All
for their
VCs
own
have a community manager. Like almost all VCs have a community platform
Amazing.
person, basically.
Exactly.
Wait, so let's give it. I know Axel had Avinash, right? So that's your community person, but I think they're doing the hybrid piece, right? Which is I'll get someone to to build communities offline and do a lot of interaction online. But do these community managers, let's say with VCs, is there a middle layer? Like, a Slack community for all the founders that have been funded?
They're like Slack communities, they're WhatsApp. In India, like WhatsApp is
WhatsApp.
So, I've interacted with Jitesh from Bloom and like Bloom team. So they have WhatsApp groups for like CTOs, CFOs, and so that portfolio to interact with each other. They keep and on the offline side, they do all the industry sessions and so on, right? Like even Axel had like seed to scale program, which they put together. So those are to answer your question, I don't think every business is like needs a community for the sake of it.
But what's a business, Pramod? What's a business that you think
let's say Paytm in general is a utility app, like for example, right? It doesn't need a community for its payments business, but
Paytm had Paytm Insider. Paytm Insider had
so that's what I'm saying. They also started an app developer app platform as well. For that, it makes sense, right? So I think that for the overall business, like it might not make sense, but there's always going to be a sliver, like even in the large organizations where it makes sense. But to Suhas's point, traditional brands, I think in a sector, the new age brands who are coming up are taking communities. Like even FMCG, if you look at the Whole Truth or some of these brands, they're very content and community focused rather than the same traditional counterparts, right? So I think almost in every sector, people will be like, we need a network effect that's beyond just the product. So that's going to be the norm going ahead.
So what's the roles? Like I mean, it's so cliched to call this, but like, let's say I wanted to hire a community manager, right? What is the JD I'm going to put across? Is like, hey, you'll be empathetic, you really care, you love the brand, but like, because they might be doing a lot of the top of the funnel content creation, but the nurturing piece on the content side, I mean, on the community side also, right? And like, I need to come up with, hey, what kind of communities do I need to build? Are there micro communities that I need to build for each of them? So how the two of you thought about communities for, let's say, your own platforms, and similarly, like what are you seeing out there in terms of, I guess, just roles and responsibilities?
So as you've been in the community space much longer and met a lot of them. So why don't you go first? I'll chime in.
I'll give you a hack. I think anyone coming from hospitality, direct hospitality as we know it, or airlines. In airlines, you have people who, the hostess or the male, basically
stewards.
Stewards. That's the word. I feel they are a great starting point. Second, anyone who understands human psychology a little better, right? Whether it could be doctors who work with kids, play schools. It could be psychologists as well, right? Or someone who's a student of social sciences, etc. I think anyone with some background of working with people one to one. I think with technologists, what happened, we start thinking of scale from day one. I think communities need that, do things that don't scale. And people who are comfortable with that are the people that you need. So I think empathy, etc., becomes the right word, but very difficult to find that skill. How do you find that skill? I think break it down into something where they had this one-to-one interaction with people and they enjoy that. I think that is the skill that translates into good community managers and people who have done that in different fields, right? It could be any field. In fact, Khayal's community manager is someone who has basically been a steward earlier for 10 years, right, on airplane. Lots of, that is one part of it. Second, also skill wise on domain, like I think people who are good at content, right, or greater communication, I think that is also a very important skill for a community manager. So if you are a content writer with some mix of, moving into this space, want to interact and want to broaden your scope, not just content writing, but now you want to broaden your scope, that's a great way. Somewhere community still does sit under the marketing/product domain, right? So somewhere if you're tagged along on those lines, right, if you are coming from tradition, any one part of marketing, I think community is a great layer to add on to your skill set. We were talking about VC, so I think it all depends on the terminology. If you want to call it something more fancy, it becomes a program manager role. If you want something more fancy, then it becomes a platform team, right? So those are, I think, wrappers based on which industry you're in, but a lot of the roles will overlap there. So I think these are just one or two hacks that I found. Okay, which industry do we want to go hire from if today we don't find someone who's done community earlier?
Yeah, I think so. Back at Zomato, I remember hiring someone from Red Bull. This was in Melbourne. He was the first hire, and I think the characteristic I'd say like that would define him as resourcefulness. Like he
Nice.
a combination of resourcefulness and he had that switched on thing around the domain. Like basically, he would know what's happening in Melbourne. He's like the what event is happening where and like what can and basically the pulse of the city was like he would be like tuned in. And if you have a combination of hey you have like this domain expertise and resourcefulness, that's an ideal person because they want to give value, and it's valuable as well. Like literally he's not just the community manager. He actually helped build the office, like got us like a lot of the deals, like because he knew the suppliers and like he just was like a community member there from a broader sense, right? So I think resourcefulness would be key to, well, it's very difficult to like judge this in an interview, I feel. But for me, like, at that point, we didn't have an office. I just landed there and he was the first hire. So I said, come, let's like walk and take a look at offices, spaces. And he would just come and help out there. Like he would hustle and like, he knew someone. So I think that just gives you an idea that, hey, we just met as strangers and this guy is like showing me and doing this bunch of things. So yeah, some way to gauge like resources.
How did you find him though?
That was through like LinkedIn, obviously, but we intentionally wanted someone from Red Bull, so Red Bull campus ambassador.
Okay.
Oh, that's
because nice. That's a good one.
You know about Red Bull's campus ambassador programs everywhere, right? So yeah,
good-looking people that show up at athletic events. That's that's their strategy. WeWork and Red Bull hires based on. I mean, nobody will say this, but you gotta look good to be part of the community team for both these brands.
Is this going out or are you going to edit this out?
Sorry?
You want to get cancelled? Do you want to get cancelled?
But go ahead.
I was just asking, like, was the designation given to them also community management back then?
Like every city so had a community manager. So by some coincidence he was Indian as well, but from New Zealand. So Pranav was the guy. So so he
nice.
He was at Red Bull in Melbourne. We gave community manager as a title to everyone. We had 35 community managers at one point across multiple cities. So every city would have one community manager. So our approach was like the first hire is community manager, then or the content. So there are two people, community content and one operations, right? Uber had a similar approach. because we were expanding at the same time internationally. Uber's would be a 3-member team. There's a general ops person, one on the driver side, there's a person, and then one on the merchant or partnership side.
Launch teams, right? Essentially.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
But what's the weekly responsibilities looking? I mean, maybe Zomato, you could use Zomato as an example, but what is this community person doing on a weekly or a monthly basis in a certain city?
Yeah, so to be honest, like the first 2-3 months, I mean, let's say before the launch in a city, like there's one team which is literally going to restaurants, each and every restaurant, collecting menu cards and building the listings. And in parallel, we are meeting users. So there will be like the community manager, me, and let's say a couple others. We're meeting like 3 users a day once like the menu collection and everything is done. So literally we identify, okay, here are people talking about food. Here are like, top reviewers on other platforms like TripAdvisor or Yelp or Urban Spoon. Let's just reach out to them. We meet like 200 users beforehand, introduce Zomato and get them, these are our early adopters essentially.
But what is your pitch to them to say, hey, talk to me and give me your time?
Just like, hey, we are building this for you to help you, get better. And like, it's more value first. Like, we're doing this to add value to you, and then we want to do it right. So it'd be great if we could just grab coffee, right? So it's literally that. And a lot of them, I initially never thought, like, I come from like engineering and then consulting background. So when I was sending these mails, or like, who's going to give me a meeting? But a lot of them, if you position it, like if you genuinely mean it, like, this will add value to you, right? And we want to do it in a way that adds, like, it helps the entire city, like, discover restaurants better. And your inputs are valuable. So I think, and we also gave a slight idea of, hey, like we've seen in India, like, these folks build their brand around food, like, by being on the platform and so on. So that helped us. So the general role is this, like, at the start, we are trying to get early adopters, get product feedback. Like, Suhas mentioned, the community is at an intersection of marketing and product, right? So we are taking these signals and then we'd go back and say, hey, these customizations are needed for this city for it to do well, right? So that's one. But then, so Zomato's context, we brought the restaurant content, but reviews had to come in organically, right? And this is the first, like the 0 to 1, like the slow building. The first 2-3 months, like these are the people who we met, like the folks who are passionate about food, them like sharing experiences. And then what would happen is a network effect. Let's say you come in 3 months later onto Zomato, then you'll be like, wow, this amazing food expert is writing reviews on Zomato. Like, maybe check out. So then the credibility factor comes in, right?
Yeah.
So people trust Zomato more because they're like real reviews coming in. And I think that effect lasts till today. Like if you think about a restaurant rating, you would think of Zomato's rating rather than any other platform.
For sure.
Right? That's
100%.
sort of, that, hey, okay, this is genuine in terms of rating.
Yeah.
Pramod, but why did that focus go away? Like, I remember back in the day, we all used to read this reviews and then go. But today on the Zomato app, I don't know if you've been following, and just want your view from the outside today.
15, 16 is when we started transitioning to more like utility-based product, which is now like completely utility-based. Like, it's like online ordering. You order and you're expecting a delivery at the next point of time. I think if you look at the utility space, the community context or like the use case is not that significant, because if you create a community in here, then it's all going to be about, hey, my order came late, like, and those kind of like messages on the user side.
It gets mixed.
Yeah, and it's more like reliability and so on. So I think because of the design of it, or like the behavior of it itself, that took prominence. But if you look at the dining out section, that still thrives on reviews and on ratings, right? So that still needs that community element coming together, like, contributing, sharing experiences. Yeah, but I think a broader, like, on a Zomato lens, I think the first 6 years, it was the core focus for us, as like online ordering like took like prominence. I think it's more like service level quality, which is very important right now. But in the dine out side, I think it's still, or even Zomato Gold, there are a lot of community things that make sense there. Yeah.
So I want to know, how do you make sure a community doesn't become about support, right? Like I feel like in India, it's very common.
Like customer support.
Customers support, right?
Yeah.
Like I remember
the
folks at Airtel did like a little workshop with them, and their biggest issue is, man, our Twitter is only about this sucks, right? Like my internet connection is terrible, fix it, right?
So actually, strangely, a lot of communities are about support. The thing that the example where I took here, like, service related, is because it's a one-to-one interaction, right? Like when you order from the restaurant, you want like that food delivered, and like I can't help you as a community member, right? Like it's the brand and you. There is no community angle there. Like, it's just like stream, right? But if you look at, I mean, this is let's say SaaS as an example. A lot of the communities are centered around support. So developer tools, the way developers decide on which tool to use, they look at, is the documentation good? Is the community support good? If I ask a question, do I get an answer from the community, right? It doesn't have to be from the product. And then they decide like, hey, okay, this makes sense. And all engineers, like, for any library or anything that they use, they look at, is the community helpful enough if I get stuck? So actually, I think it's more depends on the sector or the kind of company. But yeah, support is a very common, even for us, like our community is, it's a community of community builders, but largely our product feedback, and we also share our roadmap and updates on our Slack. Amongst other things, we also have like things for ask and offer, amplify, and so on. But product support and product feedback.
But that's okay. So primarily it is very support based and a lot of the product stuff. Okay.
Yes.
Supplier side also, to add another example, I think the way Airbnb cracked the supply, if you check out today on the direct app, it's definitely consumer focused. You'll not find it, but there's a forum called community.withairbnb.com. I think that's the one where they have over 900,000 posts, or maybe over 1 million today, with 100,000 home owners who are actually Airbnb hosts there. And that really helped them crack supply. In any marketplace, we know between supply and demand, you need to bootstrap supply in some form, right? And as and when you go ahead, if hosts are able to help each other, tips and tricks, do this better, do that better, and the more active ones are pushed ahead, that helped one reduce cost of customer support. That's what Pramod also mentioned there. The customer support angle comes in, but also just building trust, right? I have a family of hosts, and then if you're traveling, hosts then get get connected to each other. If I'm traveling to a certain city, then I chill with them, etc. So it just becomes a community angle for them. It worked really, really well from the supply side for them.
Tell me this: when does it make sense to build a community within the website play itself? Right, I can have something, let's say like airbnb.com/community, and all, let's say the most relevant features required so that all the discussions are happening on there, versus, hey, I should do it within an ecosystem, like let's say a Slack, or within, let's say, a LinkedIn or a Facebook. And I get there is a building play and then there's a cost involved and all that, but how should you think about it of A versus B?
Like if you're starting out without, let's say at literally zero, and you don't have traffic, you don't have your own app does not have anything, you should go where the users are, right? And because that's the best way to add value, that rather than adding another friction point, which is not a habit for them, right? So that's broadly, if you're starting out, hang out where, like, you should know your persona very well, and then hang out where they are and add value there. And over time, like, you can think of, as you scale, like, maybe having your own space, right? Where people are coming to you and on your, let's say, website or whatever. On the flip side is, if you, let's say, have an app which already is getting a lot of traffic, then let's say that you have 100,000 whatever DAUs, right? Then rather than creating another touch point, like if the people, there's already like there's a set path, within that path, having a space to like discuss makes sense. It's almost like you build that highway, like you're going there, you don't want to like you want to show like a community sign right there, rather than another point. So I think I'll take an example like Pankaj, who was earlier co-founder of Zomato, and now is building Shift, SHYFT. So they have an app for it's around again like healthcare or wellness space.
Wellness.
I think like 100,000 users they've served and so on. And now they've launched community within their app. So for members to like discuss and share, whether it's about yoga or nutrition or ask questions. But they built that traffic first, and then they started their app, the community inside their app. Before they had a WhatsApp group with different like for various like reasons, and that because at that point they still didn't have traffic on their app, right? And plus there was cost involved in building it out and so on. So you might as well get started with something that's already there.
Well said. In terms of content, right? Like, how do you? I remember I was talking to Harsha also before this was in terms of like in terms of he's built quite a few communities, like one on Bakasura, which is just like on the food. How do you? Is there a playbook on? Hey, what kind of content? Okay, actually, let's take a step back. What should the theme of my community be? Right. So let's say that like, what should I? Why am I creating this community? Second is, what kind of content do I need to be putting out so that the community is essentially engaged? And third is, how do I slowly make sure that community starts interacting with each other and it's many to many versus one to many?
And how important is that, I guess, to have that
very important
content generated from the community and interaction?
I think that's the thin line that differentiates an audience from a community. So I think that has become the core, that one single point is where you shift and say, okay, we are now moving from an audience focus to a community. But maybe I'd love Pramod to come in before I chime in. I think they've done, and he comes with like, extensive background on the content side. Maybe you can drop in some more examples, the way Zomato has probably killed it. And brand communities, I think he has a deeper experience. So if you want to share that, then I can come in. Ours is slightly different there. Like TPF, we have a specific theme based. So I'll come back on theme, but maybe you could kick this off on the content plus brand.
Yeah. I think like the first thing on the purpose of the community, like Suhas has said, like, it's essentially you want people to connect with each other, right? And if that makes sense for your brand or organization, then you, like there's a community use case. But I think like content, the way we see it is which adds value, and the same thing with the approach that we had taken initially, build the content out, build things which cater to a persona, which they like persona very well. And I think the taking one step back, like marketing is all about like deep understanding of the people you're building things for, right? It's nothing else. Like, there are different, like when you say marketing, SEO and all of that, those are just ways of reaching the customer. But it's about understanding the persona so well that, hey, these are the problems, this is where they hang out, this is what they struggle with, this is what they relate to. And that forms your thought process on what content makes sense, right? And I've always like seen that when this comes together well, that you basically that person, let's say if you're interacting or like let's say you're a potential customer for Threado, and you see some content of Threado and you say, wow, these guys actually get me, right? They understand me well. And that's the impact of content you want to drive at, rather than just saying, hey, this content looks like all the other content that's out there,
right?
Like and that manifests in many ways. Let's say like New Year's is there, just saying Happy New Year's, like there's going to be like 100,000 like Happy New Year's on the social feed. But if you understand the persona well, then you probably add in something that puts a smile on their face, right? So I think at Zomato it is always about that, on how can we mix something as like food is like you want to eat 3 times a day, like you're constantly around that. So how can you marry that with what's happening today, and sort of bring in the moment marketing there, and make it fun? Like humor obviously is a very powerful tool. So I highly recommend like bringing in humor where possible, because otherwise like especially in SaaS, like I feel like most of like SaaS is just so serious. It's
It really is.
Yeah.
all the websites, everything looks like same. So I think if like you can stand out by just being slightly different.
Yeah.
But
But it's funny, most developers like talking in memes and GIFs though.
Yeah.
Right?
100%.
That's on the content front. So I think if you have a combination of doing things that is slightly unique and time it well, right, and it's relevant to your persona, then you sort of resonate with the customer, right? And I think there's the same philosophy. And Sahil Lavingya, I think from Gumroad, he tweeted this, like basically entertaining content goes the farthest, then comes inspirational content, and then educational content, right? I think majority of the world does educational content, which is saying that, hey, I have built this feature, right? Or this is what my product does. Inspirational content is like, look at this person who was struggling, like, and then did this and like, went on to do all of that, right? And entertaining is just like, you'll be like, wow, I never thought of it like this, right?
Yeah.
So if you have that framework, I think like, and try to be more on the inspirational and, like real stories, inspiring stories and like fun stuff. From a content standpoint, I think, and it's consistency that matters there. Yeah.
Right.
I think to entertain and inspire, first you need to become an interesting person. That's when, like, you're going to get these stories out there.
Is that
That's
necessary
why
though?
probably
Like,
I've seen that. It's impossible for you to.
I think it
How are
builds
you going
over
to get those
time.
quips?
So it builds over time, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you have this knack of doing it, like you do, and to be honest, like when you start out, nobody's going to like, react to things that you put out.
Yeah.
Right?
I agree.
And it's only us who feel like, oh my God, this content did not make sense, but actually it's not on anyone's time feed. So you will not get that feedback anyway. So, but if you do it over and over, you'll
But
get
you
it over time. Yeah.
quick question there. Quick question. That knack, that quip that you need to have, that still exists. I agree. Yes, maybe only 100 people will see it till you don't have that distribution. But let's take an example. Zomato had some really creative folks, and I know they came from different fields,
Correct.
and you've seen their journey. And reason I'm bringing back Zomato, you take it from any space, but we both know who we're talking about. So don't you think there is a certain knack now? Yes, that can be developed, and that's what I meant by interesting. It's not that you're born with it, but it's just that you need to go one step beyond. Unless you're getting those experiences, some form of interest, and it could be just reading somewhere, consuming that kind of content somewhere.
Yeah.
It's different ways to get there, but
Correct.
without that
Without
creative
that,
input,
it's
is
like
very
it feels
difficult
like
to get
force
that.
fit. Yeah, it
Yeah.
shouldn't feel like a hey,
Yeah.
I'm trying too hard to do it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think Zomato, we were fortunate to find many people like there were. So it is Akshar, Pranav, Shakti Shetty, and Ramyak were more recently, Shantanu, and so on. Like all of them came with this knack of viewing things in an extremely like different way, right? And then it is about like giving like basically letting them be who they are, right? And so I don't think it's
Was there a
everybody
pattern?
able to do it. Sorry. So you
Was there a pattern that you were able in the retro? Do you think there's a pattern to this? If we were to tomorrow like try it for our brands today, do you think there is some pattern that you could derive from that?
First, it comes from I think having that taste for like that kind of content, like and I think Vinder, Pankaj, all of us like were pushing the boundaries of trying different things and like taking like quirkiness was like core in our DNA from start. Even without let's say these folks, like it was right from the start. And although it was bad quality back then, whereas I'm talking about 2011, but I think we were still like wanting to do those things. So I think it comes from the intent of hey, we want to be this. And then like Akshar came along, like he had minimalistic Bollywood posters that time. We reached out and then once Akshar came in, like there are others who came in because they saw this kind of content and it sort of builds over time, right? So, but I think it starts with that intent of hey, we are this brand, right? Like and let's figure out how to do more of that. Yeah.
Well
Ajay,
said.
was that the angle that you were asking?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Just
Like, how do you have to actually, like, how interesting as a person you need to be to put out interesting content? I think was the point.
There's one person I know, who I know when they used to put out content from a stand-up, like by the way, you talked about like these three types, right? Entertaining, inspirational, educational. Like a lot of these stand-up comedians are doing really well on LinkedIn, right? And I remember one of them, their content was decent, right? When they started off, like he was trying to become a stand-up comedian, and it was pretty decent. However, I think the last year or so, things have really like started becoming funny. I don't know whether I'm warming up to his humor or his humor
I
has
think
just
it's
gotten
both.
better. No,
I
but
think
it's correct. I
it
think
happens
there's
with all content. I think there is an education layer for the audience to also start understanding that form of content. Be like, oh, this is the kind of humor I'm getting from this person.
Yeah, but I think people do get better, and once they understand
Yeah.
context in terms of what works, I think cool. Pramod and Suhas, I mean, you guys are
on that point, before like Akshar and all, we were trying too hard, but some things were just to fly. But we were meeting a lot of the stand-up comedians back then, and with the intent of like doing something quirky. And I remember meeting the Khamba. Khamba was part of AI. Yeah. So back then he used to do stand-up at open mics in Gurgaon and so on. So I think that's the same. You build over time, and then somehow, like, thankfully, Akshar came along, and then like he was there like for like 8 years, and then the rest of the folks like obviously came in. I think a lot of times like brands don't invest in building that team. Like they want to outsource this agencies.
Yeah.
That I think is not like build. It takes time. Like same thing with community. This also takes time, but it's important to build it in-house. And we're applying the same approach at Threado as well. Like, obviously not anywhere close to like Zomato's level, but hopefully we'll get there soon.
I love this line. Like this pipeline is something that and honestly you would see it in because we looked at content at a very, very late stage. Today, if anyone asks me, that's been my biggest learning. Right? Content is very, very integral. But I love this. Like this stand-up comedian to great content on social wala pipeline is something I will tap into when we have the resources to. But
Right.
I love that.
Tell me this, does your strategy change in terms of community building based on size? Like, I need to build my first 100 versus my first 1,000 or 10,000 to 100,000. Is like, do you have a playbook
100%.
for that?
There is a playbook, but a playbook, obviously, it's not same for all communities. Like, the playbook that we had for like Zomato for the was also at an operation level. I mean, there were things for community, but also like, what do we do when we are at this stage in a city, and what is the focus for the community manager there is very different from like when we are starting out. The same, like even our Slack community right now, the 300 members, the first when we were just like 20-30 is very different because they're literally like you need to be heavy lifting and sharing content and like just doing the one-on-ones and doing things that don't scale. We're still at a stage where we need to do things that don't scale, right? And that could mean we are doing those one-on-ones, something like if I'm chatting with you mentioned something, I'd be like, hey, that'll be great if you can post it there, right? So those things, like just to build that engine. One of the things you were asking was, is it important for people to connect with each other and share content? That actually gets built over time. So like we did a small change in our channel. So earlier it was all about us asking people to RSVP to events every week. So we said we'll stop that, and this is from January onwards. And now we just created 3 channels: one for asks and offers, amplify, and small wins. And that organically people are sharing more, right? So I think just that strategy when we are at 2000 may be very different, but right now it's about how do we create a space where people feel welcomed and they share like product feedback and all of that, and sometimes people just DM you, right? Because early on they don't know, is it right to like post somewhere? So then I think it's about just saying, hey, like this is great, like can you just post it in the community itself, and it'll help other members, right? So those things change depending on the stage.
Yeah, no, 100% agree with that. I think at every magnitude of 0 to 10, 10 to 100, 100 to 1000, 1000 to 10,000, 10,000 to 100,000, I think the playbook slightly shifts. And like Pramod rightly mentioned, I think what we mean by playbook here is it's slightly of a skeleton. You will have to adapt it to whatever you're building, right? This nuance could be in the space you're building, a healthcare community, to an education community, to a fitness community, to a food community, to a photography, to a, any of these communities will be different. Second will also be online, offline, hybrid, demographic, India, outside. A lot of these nuances will come into play to take that skeleton. But yes, a lot of the activity that now tomorrow, like we discussed, right? Starting communities, how do I get my first 10? And that's why it's very similar to product management, right? How do I get my first 10 users? Yeah, it'll be like, hey, how do I attract my first 10 members? Then about 100 users, 100 members, right? Now I've gotten 100 members. How do I engage with them? How do I ensure? And like Pramod mentioned, day one you will know it's very difficult for people to chat with each other. Or even if they end up chatting for 7 days, they might, and then you'll start seeing some lots of communities can become graveyards very, very soon, right?
Yeah.
Unless there is till a certain point, you will have to put in that effort. At some point, there's always an inflection point. That inflection point, you'll see that many to many come in. And as communities grow, then now you need to start figuring out micro communities. So it's like this entire circle, right? You tend to find that inflection point. You need to grow at a certain pace to get to inflection point. From inflection point, now okay, lots of people want to be part, so you grow fast. After a certain point, then you realize, okay, now all the members in your community will not still be interested in that common theme. Then you need to start figuring out, okay, hey, micro communities, channels, Discord, you'll see servers coming through, folks coming through. So you'll start figuring out cohorts within your community, and then again it's the same process all over again. So it's that cycle.
It's also,
that you
I
need to
think,
go through.
and what TPF also has done very well. I think, like from the community itself, a lot of folks like sort of become volunteers to sort of scale the community, right? Like, and I think that's the best way you empower members who are demonstrating the passion and also like are deeply involved to actually take the community to the next stage, right? And that's how you manage scale. Otherwise, it's impossible, like for one person or like a small team of members to do it, I feel.
Agreed.
Actually, just a random thought. I don't know, Pramod, if this might be interesting for you, is like how Zerodha have their university, right? It might be interesting for you to create a course around becoming a community manager, take that whole path.
I just set up yesterday and the day before. Maven launched their platform. So it's in the work in progress, like Threado Academy, or like
nice.
Just playing around with that tool to set that up.
Because such a good idea. I mean, if you're able to create the awareness, it benefits everybody, right? Like if you're able to tell companies, and you need to hire a community manager, take my tool after that, right? So, that's further good.
It's probably the worst example I'm giving, but you remember Tally back in the day. The adoption came by actually educating and training 100,000 people to use Tally, and today it's a locked ecosystem, right? So many SaaS platforms came through. Tally still, you take it from the other side and think, okay, hey, they've left so much value on the table. Fair enough, but if you think it from their point of view, they've like an entire ecosystem built by just training so many people on Tally.
Today, if you get your distribution right, then it doesn't matter. I mean, as in more when we started digging, like your execution's becoming a lot more important, distribution's becoming a lot more important. You don't have to enter the game first anymore, I think, or even third or fourth, right? And it's good to see.
100%.
Pramod, it's good to see when you said, hey, there are 8,000 marketing tech tools. It's like, oh, you guys you're cutting through the noise and doing really well. So kudos to you. Listen, I have not been this engaged in a podcast. I felt like we should be cutting out 15, 20 reels out of this. But yeah, any final questions, Ajay, from your end?
No, I think we're good. I think we're over time also. So thanks, guys, for doing this. This was super fun.
No, absolutely.
I mean, for me, it was a big learning, not something I'm too familiar with at all as a subject space. So it was great.
Thanks a lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah, no, I think one thing to end with, I think both of you all should continue doing. I think this is probably a series that you're starting, but both of you should definitely do more podcasts. I think you all have the voice for it. Like just hearing the two of you all on top. No, yeah, honestly, I think you'll have
Nice.
a really nice voice.
So
for
as
it. I
it's the
don't know.
mic, dude.
It
You
boils down
get a
to
good mic,
consistency.
you'll get a good voice.
No, it's not that. It's not that. It's not that. It's not just that. Probably that, but it's not just that. I think you all both have a really nice tone and communication.
Anirudh, you sound very much like Ganesh, whose t-shirt I'm wearing right now. This is Down But Not Out, flat
Oh,
founder.
oh,
Ganesh has
oh,
exactly the same voice that Anirudh has.
Oh yeah,
Nice.
wait,
Hey,
he okay, that I didn't know about this shirt. Now I get the reference. Down but not out. But what is the reference to the t-shirt? He launched it
that's a
after the
Shark
Shark
Tank
Tank
thing.
No,
episode.
Shark
So
Tank.
the same voice.
Yeah, so I think Aman said you're down but not out, my friend, or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
And then
yeah.
the Soul Store, is it? They and
Soul Store.
Alex partnered to launch this
So
t-shirt right after.
creative.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's pretty cool. Hey,
So
listen, we'd love
smart.
to have Ganesh
So
on the
smart.
podcast, no? We're doing one on framework
Pramod.
for how to get into Shark Tank, and maybe we already have one. The guy who started GrowFitter, and they raise around. I think from Aman itself. I think.
Got
Who's
it.
the-
Yeah, I'm happy to
nice.
connect to you. It'll be you will actually realize your voice and his voice is the same when you do the podcast. So.
Oh, really?
That's why we need video.
Nice. Good to see.
No, but I definitely continue. I think.
Yeah, no, it's been a lot of
it's gonna
fun
be
actually.
amazing.
Yeah. Like we both said, like whatever happens with everything else, we'll continue the podcast because it's just fun, and I think we get to meet really
People
cool
like you.
Just
Yeah.
the diversity in conversation that we've had every week has
Listen,
been superb.
we are essentially paying editing costs for learning for 1.5 hours.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
worth it,
Yeah.
right? So
Smart.
yeah. So,
Pramod, let's also do a community podcast. I'll run one first.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Then
No,
I'll
no,
learn
one more thing we've
while
been telling
chatting.
everyone is post maybe like our first 12 episodes or something, we're gonna have like a drinks night
like
with
a
everyone
Zoom.
who's
Yeah.
appeared on this podcast, which I think will be amazing because
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'll be amazing.
like I feel
That'll be
everyone will get
amazing.
along really well.
I'll give you another idea what I'm doing now. So I run a podcast called The Ramp Show. Pramod, you might have seen with Paul. We do the Web3 one.
Correct. Yes.
We've done one season. We're launching season 2. So we've roped in Bonomi. I don't know how it will turn out. Touch wood. Like maybe please edit out this part. I don't know how it will.
Hey, wait, let me stop
But the
recording.
idea essentially.